Undersecretary Maria Otero, thank you so much for giving us the time.
My pleasure.
It's our pleasure really to present you to Tibet and all our viewers inside Tibet. I'll start off by mentioning, I don't think many Tibetans will know that you were actually born in La Paz, Bolivia.
That's correct.
And La Paz has been described by the travel guide Lonely Planet as the Tibet of the Americas, with beautiful high altitude areas that require strong lungs and bottles of oxygen. So I'm assuming you have the lungs. So will you be visiting Tibet at all?
That is so interesting because from the time that I was born, La Paz always talks about Tibet, and my uncles used to say, "Oh, we're just like Tibet." So it seems only just that I am now the special coordinator on Tibet, and that hopefully I will be able to visit Tibet at some point.
Wonderful. I wanted to ask you, I think most Tibetans have heard that your office is the special coordinator on Tibetan issues for the State Department.
Right.
How do you define your mission and how do you measure success?
The mission that we have, and I think as you know, Congress, the United States Congress, has been not only involved in this, but also mandating that the Department of State to be able to have an office on Tibet and to be able to provide the support and help ensure that religious, cultural, educational freedoms are made available to the Tibetan people. And so our work is to really help that process move forward, including helping advance a dialogue between China and Tibet. And we have an office that is staffed with 3 people that work full-time on this effort, and our effort is to really advance those areas. I mean, our success is based on that effort. And to put it in context, these are the kinds of freedoms that we look at around the world. And so most of the countries where I work, these are the kind of conversations that we have, the freedoms that citizens need to be able to have in order to have a full life.
The U.S. has been for many years a very strong supporter of the dialogue process, as you mentioned, between Beijing and Dharamsala. As a matter of fact, in January you made a statement where you said, "We call on the Chinese government to resume substantive results-oriented dialogue with the Dalai Lama or his representatives." However, earlier this month, as you know, the 2 envoys of the Dalai Lama have resigned, and their resignations were accepted. And they cited frustration at the lack of progress over the course of the 9 rounds of talks since 2002, and the worsening situation inside Tibet. What is your assessment of this dialogue process, and why do you think they haven't yielded any results?
Well, we do believe that dialogue is the best way in which the long-standing differences that have existed are addressed, and that issues that have to do with the livelihood of Tibetans, with the education of Tibetans, could also be addressed effectively. And so we will continue to address this as one mechanism to be able to have the situation in Tibet improve. We will continue to encourage and to urge and to ask strongly that the Chinese government continue these dialogues. There's no question that there has been frustration. The last dialogue was in January 2010, and we have seen, certainly in the last few years, a real deterioration of the human rights situation in Tibet. So you can see why the representatives of the Dalai Lama would find themselves frustrated and not finding any success in this area. So we see that is one of the areas which we will continue pushing, but which is, as you've noted, not meeting with much success.
Do you feel that the Chinese side is taking this process seriously?
We would certainly like to think that they are, yet we see that they are quite reluctant at this point to engage in these dialogues. And we do believe that being able to have the opportunity to negotiate and to have a substantive dialogue is the way in which some of these areas can be addressed. And we deplore some of the other means of addressing these issues, which are, as you well know, creating the level of frustration among Tibetans that are leading to self-immolations and to other acts of really desperation.
In a statement also in January, where you addressed a wide-ranging number of issues concerning Tibet, you said the U.S. government has repeatedly urged the Chinese government to address the counterproductive policies in Tibetan areas that have created tensions and that threaten the distinct religious, cultural and linguistic identity of the Tibetan people. Beijing has always usually countered statements like yours by accusing the U.S. of interfering in its internal matters. What is your response to that statement or that response from Beijing?
Well, the response is that we will continue to make this point, and we will continue to make it at the highest levels of government. In fact, in some of the meetings that I have participated in where I have been with Secretary Clinton, and she has been meeting with high-level officials from the Chinese government, this is an issue that she brings up and that she will continue to bring up. We know that President Obama has also addressed this. We believe that the freedom of people to be able to carry out their own religious beliefs, their own culture, their own art, their own tradition is an important set of freedoms that we believe need to be available to the Tibetans. So we will continue addressing this. We don't believe that we're meddling in any of the affairs of any country. We believe that this is really part of the way in which we engage with other countries and that we engage in our own diplomacy.
Today, earlier today, this afternoon, actually local time in Tibet, once again, two young Tibetans, a 22-year-old and a 24-year-old, have resorted to self-immolation in eastern Tibet. And last year, as you know, there's been a very sudden rise of self-immolations, mainly by young people, although last week we had an older gentleman, almost 60 years old. And there doesn't seem to be any sign of abating in this action. Rather than acknowledging these, Beijing, rather than acknowledging these and trying to address their grievances seriously, China has essentially, I think, if you look at the Chinese response over the last 2 years, have essentially dismissed them as being carried out by easily influenced troublemakers and outcasts. What is your assessment of these self-immolations, of this very extreme lengths that people have gone to express themselves?
Clearly, the self-immolations that we are seeing are not only desperate acts, but they're desperate acts that are born out of the frustration and the despair that people feel as they see the increased violation of human rights, the increased restrictions under which the monasteries are operating, the increased levels of control that they are seeing on their own lives, and their inability to be able to continue living that way. There have been 39 self-immolations. Now there are 2 more that we also hear about today. And we believe that these are not only very sad events, but they are also the way in which Tibetans are responding to what we see as being an increasing level of control that we are seeing not only in the monasteries, and Kirti Monastery is the one that is best known, but also throughout the Tibetan communities. We are seeing increased Chinese officials being in monasteries themselves. We see the restriction of freedoms. We see the controls that are being placed. And all of these things are the response that the Chinese are giving to this issue rather than addressing it in a way that would be productive. Some of my staff have traveled into the eastern part of Tibet, have met with monks, have addressed some of these issues. And clearly these are not outcasts. These are not people that are operating in an unusual way. These are people that are committed to their way of life, that see the life in a monastery as a real reflection of the beliefs of the Tibetan people. And the only way that they see themselves being able to respond to the restrictions that they are feeling and to the repression that they are that are now becoming stronger and stronger is to take on these acts of desperation.
Now you've met His Holiness the Dalai Lama several times. You've
Yes.
actually been to
Yes,
Dharamsala.
Indeed.
What is your assessment of him as a man, and what is your feeling towards accusations from Beijing that first of all he is a wolf in sheep's clothing and that he's possibly behind the self-immolations? What is your feeling about the Dalai Lama?
Well, the Dalai Lama it's just a wonderful thing to be around him and to meet him. It is such really an honor and a privilege to listen to his articulation of the most important beliefs of the Tibetan people, and also of his vision of what he is looking for, because he is always looking for that autonomy that will enable the Tibetan people to carry out their religious beliefs, to preserve their culture, to preserve their traditions, to preserve their art, and that in no way he's talking about an independent Tibetan. And so when one listens to him talk about his own position, you note that the accusations that are made about what he is attempting to carry out really are just not the case.
I see.
You can listen to his words and you can listen and watch his deeds to be able to understand that this is the way that he is proceeding. On the self-immolations, we know that he has disassociated himself from these events, and he has also made statements about how these are not really a Buddhist practice, and that they are not part of the way in which Buddhism is carried out. So the self-immolations really have to be seen as individual sacrifices in a situation of repression that is so strong. But the Dalai Lama, we know him, and our president meets with him as one of the world's most important religious leaders, and his influence and his words have great impact, and it's very clear why that is.
I see. So your feeling is that the Dalai Lama's offer, I think it's been on the table for many years now, of a genuine autonomous status for Tibetans within the PRC, where Tibetans are able to practice and protect their culture for all areas, Tibetan ethnic prefectures and regions, is a viable solution that can be discussed.
There is no reason why Tibetans, like any other people, should not be able to have access to these freedoms and be able to practice them in order to preserve those pieces that constitute a society, a community, and that are very important.
Leaving Tibet for a moment, I'd like to turn to Nepal, where you've also traveled.
Yes.
You're quite familiar with the Tibetan problems with that country. Incidentally, up until relatively recently, I mean, Tibetans have had a wonderful relationship and experience in Nepal, with this, except for the last few years. You've said that you'd like to work with Nepal to resolve the protracted refugee situation of Tibetans in Nepal, with the third generation of Tibetans still not having a path to a durable status for residency in Nepal or travel from Nepal. Are you seeing any progress on that, and what do you see as a possible solution for this?
Well, as you've noted, some Tibetans have been in Nepal now for 3 generations, and so one does have to acknowledge that Nepal has been generous in opening its doors to Tibetans, enabling them to reside in that country and to live in a way that allows them to continue carrying out their own beliefs and their own activities, their own religion. But at the same time, we know that Nepal has pressures put on it, and we we do know that even under those pressures, they have continued making an effort to maintain a relationship with the Tibetans that are living there that are manageable and that enables them to live. We have met with Nepalese authorities. We have, in order to be able to discuss issues that have to do with some regulations, issue of identity cards, other factors that can facilitate even more the way in which Nepalese are living in that, Tibetans are living in that country.
I think the situation is deteriorating actually more. In recent months, many Tibetans are fearing actually going outdoors, and young Tibetans are not able to work in Nepalese companies, etc. There was an idea floating around a couple of years ago of bringing over a certain number of Tibetans to the US, and travel papers were not being issued. Is there any effort to work on that?
We also are working, as I said, with the Nepalese government to be able to address some of these issues. And as you know, there's also many Tibetans that come into Nepal as refugees, initially into the refugee center. So part of the work is also working with our refugee center and ensuring that the humanitarian agencies are working in this area.
One final question. There are very few Tibetans in the US, a very small constituency, almost none to speak of, and no economic force in American society. But there's been, for decades, a very strong support for Tibetans and the Tibetan issues in the US, both by the people and also on the Hill. What do you attribute that to? Do you have a sense of why there's such a strong interest and support for Tibetans?
Well, my sense is that His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, and his expression of both the beliefs that the Tibetans have and his own vision of the world and his religion have been factors that have really contributed to the level of interest in this country. There may not be many Tibetans, but there's quite a number of Buddhists in the United States, so that when His Holiness arrives in Washington and does a teach-in or does an event, he fills an arena that's usually for a basketball game.
True.
And most of the people there are Americans who practice the religion and who see him as their holy leader. So this is also one of the factors that contributes to the level of interest that there is. And that includes members of Congress, it includes influential people, and those individuals themselves also take leadership in helping ensure that the repression of Tibetan people in their own land can be overcome. And so this is, I think, the interest in the United States emerges from people's religious beliefs, but also interest in democracy and human rights values.
Thank you so much, Secretary Otero. Thank you
You're
very
welcome.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.